Dear friends and fellow progressives, welcome to Berlin.
And welcome after the break, a very short break, but I hope you still have energy to continue. And just a quick reminder, Forum from Anxiety to Action, Empowering the Youth. Boardroom, that's the by invitation only session. Change is in the year shaping the EU-UK relations. And here at the main stage, we will be talking about fostering innovation and social progress, the role of AI in strengthening European sovereignty. And we have an excellent chair, excellent expert to moderate the session. Please welcome Corinna Visser, who is a journalist focused on digital policy of the EU from Europe Table. Corinna, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Our Chancellor was very brief, so welcome from me too to Berlin. And I'd like to also welcome my panelists, which is Michael Schönstein, Head of General Digital Policy, Federal Chancellery of Germany. Please come to the stage. He is also, please take the first. He is also co-chair of the OECD AI expert group on AI futures. And he was pointing out that futures is very important. Maybe he can talk about that later on. We have Paula Cipierre. She's Director of Data Ethics and Innovation at Ada Learning. That is a platform for personal growth and organizational development that facilitates collaboration towards a more digital and sustainable future. And previously, she was head of privacy and public policy at Palantir Technologies. Sounds like a very interesting job. And last but not least, I welcome Thomas Ramge. He is a non-fiction author and keynote speaker and moderator. And his books and lectures describe and reflect the force of change of technology and digitalization in almost every sphere of life. And we have Kim Sparrentak. I will introduce her later when you can see her, because she is here virtually and will be with us in a moment. And Thomas, he will start with a new study that he did together with the Progressive Zentrum. So we have some food for our conversation afterwards. So Thomas, the stage is yours.
Hope so. Then I provide some food for thought. Thank you very much for choosing this session, in which I will give you a very, very brief sneak preview on what will be published in our study beginning of July. The question we are addressing in that study is, what would a good future with AI look like? And we've, in the very first session, already heard quite a bit on how important optimistic future narratives are in order to sort of picture something positive in the future that we can work to, that we can aim for. Let me start with basically asking that question in a little reframed way to you. Who of you thinks that artificial intelligence will improve its personal life, let's say, in a time frame of 5 to 10 years? I mean, give and take. We know there are negative aspects, but after all, if you sum it up, will it be more positive? So I would say 2/3, possibly more than half empty the glass, who think it'll be no. After all, the negative aspects will prevail. Yeah, that's few. That's very few. That's, I would say about 10 to 15%. Anyone who doesn't know, say it'll be probably balanced. I don't know. Who will know? Whatever. Future is difficult to predict. You on the safe side? From the standpoint of today, however, this is not how Germany is voting about it. For this study, we've done a quite big poll asking, or survey, asked about 5,000 people. What do you think? We ask in many dimensions, and that was the broadest questions, just as I ask you. And no, I can say that's only the tip of the iceberg. The whole poll we did is entirely negative. Through all demographics, through all educational levels, through all age, through East, West, Germans don't expect much from artificial intelligence, at least not much good of it. And I don't know, Max, in your question in the first session, you introduced the word Lebenslügen, as you would probably like to see that word as being becoming a loan word from German in the English language, a German loan word, just like Zeitgeist or Fahrvergnügen, or possibly Fortschrittspessimismus. I mean, that's what we're experts in, aren't we? So, all the native English, you might import that word made in Germany to the English language. Our study is definitely backing the language, but of course, it's not only about being pessimistic of the future prospects of artificial intelligence, particularly, or technology, advanced technology, data-rich technology, more in general. But even more in general, there is a huge problem we have, possibly not only in Germany, how future narratives can do what they were meant to do. Picture a future that we can aim for and that we can work towards. And, well, that is a very, very well-argued, interesting, original essay. It's just been published 2 weeks ago in Die Zeit, German weekly, from one of possibly right now most renowned, most acclaimed sociologist, Andreas Reckwitz, who basically says, trying to condense it in a nutshell, that long and very well-argued essay, is that the problem about future narratives is that they are not credible anymore. That they don't feel credible because they haven't delivered in the last decade. And in the times of polar crisis, of polarization, and all the huge problems we are facing right now, the security crisis, of course, it's not credible to be optimistic about progress anymore. And Andreas reverses it, or at least reframes it, is by saying that we have to admit, in order to tell credible future narratives, we can only claim that we might be able to defend the progress of the past. That this would be a credible narrative in general. That liberal democracies will at least not regress. It's not what we like to hear. It's an interesting argument. I'm not 100% sure yet to what extent I would agree. But what I'm sure of is that this is not true for technology. How would a good future with ample of AI in application look like? Well, it would be right in many senses, and we can prove it from the data points of the present. We already see that in work and business. If AI systems are well applied, they foster automation, and these smart idiot savants of little AI agents relieve our daily work from routine work that we don't like to do. We know already that, yes, with AI well applied in work and business, we can find one solution towards the huge demographic challenges we have, because they are automation machines, and if we use them well, they will help us against the demographic trap we are in. There's no doubt that AI systems, well trained and well applied, will foster progress in health. They already do. I mean, I would not go anymore to a dermatologist who's not using that camera with the clever AI algorithms in it, testing if that dark dot on my arm might turn into a maligna. No, they're good. We know that if well applied, AI can make the health system more efficient. It can detect fraud in the health systems. It can help doctors to do better diagnosis and to prescribe better therapies. We already know right now that there are smart AI systems that can help students to become better in math. That work well, where you do basically part of the classroom is doing the exercises in that systems, in that gamified AI EdTech teaching assistants. They progress on the pace they need because the AI always gives them the exercise they need at the right level, nudging them into keep on learning, while the other part of the classroom is doing peer learning in the group with a teacher which has more time for the rest of them. It's very obvious, no doubt about it. We just have to use them the right way. And it is very obvious that in public administration, of course, AI systems can foster progress in the sense to make administration faster, cheaper, more reliable, more accessible, if we apply them well. Well, yeah, we're in Germany, I know. Not sure if applying AI in public administration will be really our strong suit. But, I mean, we're starting from a very low level. So in that sense, we can be optimistic. That'll be better. And actually, optimism was nothing new. FDR has been quoted this morning. Who knows that fellow? He's not an expert in public administration of the 1950s. Hey, progressives, that's your philosopher. That's Ernst Bloch. That's the guy who basically said that if we are able to build in our minds a positive and optimistic picture of the future, we'll have something that he called die konstruktive Kraft der konkreten Utopie. The constructive power of a concrete utopia or utopian vision. And, well, I know it's hard to still associate with the term, or with the term utopia in these times of public crises, but the fundamentals are still true. And the good thing about technology is, if we look at the present, there is plenty of data. There's plenty of proof that we have lots of causes for rational tech optimism. And that tech optimism and technology and fostering innovation and progress with technology is not naivete. And it's not only about, like Andreas Reckwitt said, only defending the progress of the past and seeing that as a success, as much as I have to admit that in many contexts he might have a point. But for technology, no. The funny thing about progress with technology is it's a progressive narrative that can prove to be and step by step become true. Because funny enough, the proof of concepts are built in. The systems themselves, if they are well designed, give us the data that are a proof point that things are getting better and that not worse, and that there's no still stand, as Andreas is sort of defining as the new goal. there was a single optimistic sort of reply in our larger data set that we had. We also asked our panel, 5,000 people in Germany, do you feel threatened by AI in the sense that AI is eating your work, that they're going to take away your job? So, self-confident, at least. I mean, that is very much aligned with the sort of the study data that we get right now from labor science, that no, for most people, there's no immediate threat that AI will take away their jobs. But when I've seen that answer, being 80% of the people being optimistic, no, that doesn't concern me, as the only optimistic regard, or the only optimistic view on artificial intelligence, it sort of sounds a bit like asking car drivers if they consider themselves to be over-average good drivers. And I think there always you get 80% of people who are convinced they are. Any statisticians in the room? I'm not, but I think that can't be true. But what I am convinced of is the future with AI will be bright. If intelligent humans use AI in intelligent ways, and progressives should aim to do so even more. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much. I would like to add that I think there could be a bright future of AI, but only if we find a European way to do it and not follow the other countries who are in the lead right now. I'd like to introduce Kim to the panel, if that's possible. Hi, hello, Kim.
Hey.
Hi, Kim van Sparrentak. She is from the Netherlands. She's part of the Greens. She was in the European Parliament in the last mandate and has just been re-elected. So congratulations on that. And she was a co-rapporteur for the AI Act. So she knows every word in all the more 400 plus pages of the AI Act. So that brings me to the point that I forgot at the beginning. We will open the discussion shortly before the end, so you will have the chance to ask questions. So please be prepared and have your questions ready when the time is up. So let's start with our discussion. Paula, giving the negative perception of AI among the public, could you provide a counter-argument on why AI is essential for global competitiveness and maintaining our sovereignty?
Well, it's starting with the big guns here. Well, I mean, I think that before we even reach a conversation about AI, right, there's a lot that needs to be done both on the side of technical infrastructure and the social environment for AI applications to succeed. Maybe anecdotally, a couple of years ago, I wrote a paper about COVID-19 contact tracing applications, right, where the idea was, well, it's a smart idea, like if you were in contact with somebody, right, like obviously like message it out, right, and then like if you know you are in contact with somebody, stay at home, right? Sounds great in theory. However, obviously, if you live in a social system where if you don't go to work, you lose your job, right? The incentives, or like you need to get paid, right? Then the incentive structure is such that you simply cannot afford not to go to work, right? So then the technical system breaks down because the social infrastructure doesn't allow you to actually sort of like align with the technology, so to speak. So actually we need to think probably in the reverse, right? What changes should and can we implement now at a social level, right? And what kind of technical infrastructure do we need such that we can reach this future that Thomas outlined? And I see on the social side, for instance, if you talk about schools, right, or if you talk about healthcare as well, AI will not work if you don't have a solid data foundation, right? You need representative data, you need a harmonized data infrastructure, you need to be able to test your data for bias, which is also requirements, obviously, in the AI Act, which is great. But a lot of institutions are not yet there at that point, right? And then if you throw AI into that mix, it's not going to work, or it will be dangerous. So I think we need to do our homework first, right, before we can sort of like throw AI in the mix. Like, AI is not a purpose in itself, and we need a data foundation that can support it. And I think even more importantly, we need to think about, and I think this is great, it's actually exciting, it's an opportunity to think about the kind of society we want to live in. If AI can actually fundamentally alleviate a lot of the work burden, right, can we think about a different structure for all of us to work, right? Can we actually focus on more creative tasks? I think I saw a post somewhere by someone who said, like, I don't want AI writing the poetry while I'm at home doing the dishes, right? Is that the future we want, right? And also, if we think about the fact that AI can automate a lot of knowledge work, right, does that mean, on the other hand, that we will cherish a lot of the physical manual work more? Will we pay caretakers more because that's the kind of work that AI cannot replace, right? So I think I endorse the vision. The technology is there. The technology is not the problem, but the technical and social infrastructure needs to be built first, such that AI can actually sort of like create that bright future that I think we would all want.
So that brings me to you, Michael, because well, that's it's the government who has to frame the implementation of AI. We cannot use the enormous potentials of AI, for example, in medicine administration and economy in general, when we don't have the right implementation. So what is going on in the Chancellery preparing the society for AI?
Well, I think when you speak of preparing society, also with view to the guiding questions optimally, I think we need to be a bit careful with that, because societal preferences are evolving, ever evolving. So I would say our view on that is we need to explain, to experiment, and to experience AI in Germany and enable that. What I mean by this is when we look at explaining AI, I think it is very important to us that when artificial intelligence is used, it is transparent that an AI is used, what it can do, what it cannot do. I think that is true, especially in the public administration. That is one of the reasons why you will see that several sectoral guidelines already exist. I myself used to work in the Labor Ministry, where we developed a couple of years ago already guidelines for the application of artificial intelligence in social administration. This is now also being followed up for the overall federal administration. I think this is very important because it sets out clearly that we make always transparent when AI is used, and also we limit very clearly AI to certain decision support tools, guaranteeing human oversight always. I think that's anyway a legal principle we have, but it makes that very clear. And I would also like to say, perhaps also reacting to Thomas, one thing you mentioned, using AI in the public sector. I mean, there are hundreds of AI applications at use today in federal public administration in Germany. And I think that's often a bit overlooked. I invite you all to check out the parliamentary questions we get every year from Anke Domscheit-Berg and the response to that. It's all in there. It's a lengthy list. We're transforming that into a database that's a bit easier to handle. But I think that is important when it comes, anyway, to the explaining part. Experimentation, then, I think, is also important. We need to foster more possibilities to use AI concretely. That's true for businesses. I think the provisions in the AI Act around sandboxing are very promising there. We're working on that. We have started work on that long before the AI Act. We're also running a number of initiatives to enable civil society organizations to experiment with AI, designing, deploying their own AI solutions. I think that is tremendously important as well. And of course, we're trying to create as many experiments as possible within the public sector as well. And through that, that brings me to my third point. I think we also create more and more experience with AI. I think this is also something we need to look at, and especially looking at the results here. The more concrete applications I think people can interact with that solve a concrete problem in their daily work life, the more we will get a positive connotation with using artificial intelligence. And indeed, what we find is that there's a number of surveys around attitudes to artificial intelligence that also put Germany in comparison with other countries. When we see results like that, my first hunch is always, okay, this seems pessimistic, but is it actually more pessimistic or less pessimistic than elsewhere? And just in the past week, for example, we had the OECD present a comprehensive review of Germany's AI ecosystem in international comparison that stated the positive attitude, the relatively positive attitudes of German workers compared to those in other industrialized countries are a key strength of Germany in the AI space. So, you know, it's important to square results like that, I think, with an international comparison. And I think that as more and more people experience artificial intelligence, more and more of these positive attitudes are going to grow through our population.
Yeah, I'm explaining AI. I think that's a very valid point, and I'm very curious how Chancellor Olaf Scholz will explain how he's using AI. Thomas, what do you think? Michael just said that workers have a positive attitude versus AI. What is your explanation why for the pessimistic results you got in your data? Do you have any idea on that?
First of all, it's an optimistic sign that not all polls seem to to lead to the same results. But actually, also the questions we were asking on work and business were as negative as the other ones. Well, it could. Well, first of all, it could be that if Germany becomes European champion, the poll would have been turned out much better. So you always have that context. You always have a context of a general, rather pessimistic attitude, and then there's a poll popping up on your screens, and then basically all the negative aspects that have been very present in the German debate on AI pop back up in your mind, and then obviously you put your cross there, the negative.
So you don't trust your own data?
No, well, no. Well, I know that polls are contradictory, and Michael was just saying that. In an OECD poll, it hasn't been as bad as not relatively to the others. But no, I think it is very valid data. Well, I mean, if you want a scientific answer on your question, I can't tell. We haven't asked for the reasons why the people were responding so negatively. But if you look at, I mean, the debate that we are having on AI, if you look at the public discussion, how often, I mean, the negative aspects from it'll take away your work to you have all the privacy and data issues within, up to at some point we have an artificial general intelligence which will be malignant and then either kill us or at least use us as pets. Well, that obviously sticks to the mind of people responding.
So, Paula, you wanted to add something to that?
Yeah, because I mean, I was struck in your survey that workers, right, were not as pessimistic about AI, right, and that might actually be different in other European countries. And I think there's actually something, or perhaps it might be indicative of something that Germany can actually be extremely proud of, namely the system of co-determination, right, where you do also have works councils in boards, right. That's also one of the reasons why actually German factories came through the pandemic much more successfully, because workers' councils were able to have a say with regards to the design of the factory floors and how workers would be able to interact in those settings as well. So maybe one of the reasons is that we have a functioning social security system. But then I think, again, we come to the point of communication, right? These are aspects of our country and our history and our social system, so something that the social democrats should rightly be proud of, right? How can we then reconceptualize the strengths that we have in the age of AI, where probably not jobs as such will be replaced, right, but certain aspects of your job will be automated, right? Other areas you may have to also seek further education that should be framed as an opportunity, right? So I think a lot of it is, how do we shape the narrative? How can we make sure that we maintain aspects of our social infrastructure that we can legitimately be proud of without, however, stepping on the same spot, right? Because we also need to evolve. And it's true, of course, that right now, other countries, I think at least at the business level, right, are more successful than Germany, right? And other European countries. At the level of research, Germany is exceptionally strong. But I think translating that into viable business models and now also obviously navigating the new regulatory environment, I think that will be challenging.
And I think it's very important also to educate the people, to take them with on the journey. So Kim, we were talking about Germany all the time. Do we need a European solution to these challenges that we face?
Yeah, I think that would be smarter because we know that there are a few reasons why we are actually not succeeding in having European champions. And one of them is that we don't, put our funding very clearly and make decisions and choosing in what kind of AI we want to Europe to thrive in. So it's very important that we actually, start working together better and really foster the AI industry very clearly. And I think doing that on a European level is the only way, making sure we have enough funding available. If you look at how much money is invested in the United States, how much money is invested in China, that's where we lack. We lack in making sure we have harmonization in the single market. So that's something we should foster. And that's why it also would make a lot of sense to actually, on a European level, make sure we have rules for how you can deal with algorithmic management in the workflow, but also to make sure that we have funding, dedicated funding to make sure that we have good digital players. And I think one of the things that are often discussed is just like, we also want to have a big digital player, but we have to understand that actually means that we can set the stage as well. For now, we are known as the continent that knows how to regulate, and I think we are very good at that. I'm very proud of the AI Act. I think it's a very good start in regulating artificial intelligence. But now we also have to see how we can foster our own alternatives that are in line with the ethical ideas that we have on artificial intelligence. And by doing so, we can actually make a standard, but also become more digitally sovereign, because this is, I think, one of the things that I find it very interesting to hear, the optimism versus pessimism. I think the thing is that people are not good at looking at the future. I mean, I also worked a lot on climate change. We are just not that good at imagining what the future will look like. But we know what's happening right now. We know that there has been scandals with artificial intelligence, and we know what it actually means if, there's a few very big digital corporations deciding everything on the internet, for example. The amount of people that are worried about, their kids being online continuously, the amount of people that are worried about polarization, about the fact that we don't really understand each other anymore, that you don't know what's true anymore in our society. Those are very heavily linked to digitization and thus also to artificial intelligence. And I think by making sure that we have, some European alternatives towards a few very big, only profit-focused companies that we have on the other side of the ocean, I think it's very important to make sure that we have trust. And also that we make sure that, it will be an optimistic future, because I found it interesting actually to hear the questions. I think a year ago, I was more optimistic on what artificial intelligence could do for everyone in society. But if you see how the progress is going, where also the big players in the AI field are moving towards, they are just going for quick profit again, as they usually do in the digital field. And they're not looking at who can actually, keep up, can make sure that we actually, all benefit from the things that we could benefit from the AI revolution. And I think that is extremely important. And if we don't manage to get to a point where we have European alternatives and make sure that those big corporations are not only, keep stealing all our data and making profit without actually providing tools that we need that could make our societies better, then I also don't see that we have a very optimistic future for everyone.
Can you tell us what are the key elements in the AI Act that lead us to this better future that you just described?
Well, I'm not so sure if the AI Act does that, because it's the only, it's the first regulation we have, right? It's the first Artificial Intelligence Act. It's absolutely crucial we have it, and I think we can be very proud that we have it in Europe. But what the AI Act does, it sets standards on how artificial intelligence is made, making sure it's not biased, making sure that it's safe, and that's why we also have different categories. We have certain things such as biometric mass surveillance, of which we say we don't want that on the market. That goes too far. That's too risky. You have things that are high risk. If you use it in a power plant, if you use it in legal procedures, you have to make sure that you fulfill certain standards. And then we also have, of course, the generative AI, what most people talk about the most. The ChatGPTs, they also have to make sure that it's not biased and that they do extra security checks and impact assessments to see whether they pose a threat. But what the AI Act doesn't do is tell you how to use it. You were talking about transparency. That's a provision in the AI Act. We have to be transparent on the fact that we use it, but not how we use it. That's the debate we need to have right now. We need to have the debate on, are corporations just allowed to use any type of artificial intelligence under the guise of health and safety? Or should we have, indeed, as you were already saying, sorry, I forgot your name, more discussion with employees on whether they actually want their managers to know whether they type fast enough and finish emails in one go. So I think the Artificial Intelligence Act is a very important baseline and make sure that we can trust the systems, but the whole discussion on how we can make sure who benefits, who thrives, that's the next step. And I really hope that we're not all going to be like, oh, we have an AI Act now, everything will be fine, because then I think that positive future is a bit further away than we would like.
Yes, thank you. Michael, you wanted to respond on that?
Mostly yes, and also to the first to the point before. I really agree with what Kim said. I think I would just like to underline that if we talk about, if you like, deficiencies of what we're looking at in frontier AI technologies right now, with a view to their social benefits or lack thereof, I think we need to be aware that their roots are in oligopolistic online markets for e-commerce, for social media advertising, and for cloud services. And out of these structures, we see capital and data structures that then combine to produce the type of technologies we're looking at today, specifically foundation models, large language models. That is what I'm referring to most here. Of course, if you are a company that can, through its design of services, direct very carefully how data is generated, how well structured that data arrives at your company, then you have an easier time using large amounts of data than others have. And if on top of that you can extract oligopolistic rents from your business, then clearly you also have funding to do things that are expensive. So obviously, if I were in a position like that, I would say, yes, I would do that too, because it's a logical business decision to say, right, by pursuing AI methods that require a lot of data and a lot of methods, you increase the barriers of entry for competition. So that's quite a logical market development that we're seeing here. If then we're right now talking about, you said you're a bit more pessimistic today than you were a year and a half or two ago. That's around about the time when everybody noticed generative AI's potential, I think. That is not a coincidence. So if we're unhappy with that and we want to change the trajectory of technological development in artificial intelligence, I think we need to look at the market structures that are behind that and address those. So when we say we want a European solution, I would just like to underline that that does not mean we want a European, and now pick and choose any GAFAM company name. We rather want a different market structure altogether for digital. That will also bring about very different types of companies, maybe smaller ones, that produce different types of artificial intelligence. So I think this is just something I wanted to underline and for everyone to keep in mind.
So we don't need European champions, Paula?
I think what a European champion is different maybe from what American or Chinese-based champion looks like. And perhaps a European champion in AI is already here and working in a sector that already exists and already does its job.
Okay, very mysterious. Paula, what's your take on that?
No, so many interesting points. And actually, maybe to say something sort of positive from the innovation point of view about the AI Act as well, right? One thing that I find actually very interesting is that ultimately in the scramble towards December 6th, like one of the framings that was put into the AI Act with regards to general purpose AI models, right, was the kind of distinction between the regular ones and the ones that come with systemic risk. And the way that definition was made, it was based essentially, now like sort of simplifying, right, on the floating operators, how resource intensive those are, right? So actually this in and of itself might spur innovation in Europe as well, right, with regards to more resource-effective AI models that actually don't need this amount of data, right? And we already have this kind of research, for instance, at TU Munich, around Professor Björn Ommer with regards to stable diffusion. There are sort of like open source developments in this as well, right? So this, I think, is actually a really interesting element of the AI Act, spurring innovation towards a more resource-friendly and also like a more data-moderate kind of way. But then at the same time, I also agree with you, Kim, that at the level of funding, right, and sort of like spurring, like really driving the ecosystem ahead, the AI Act does not meet this requirement. And I sometimes think it is interesting to look across the pond as well. If you look at the executive order that President Biden published last fall, right, this, I think, is a really interesting example where there are also elements in the executive order that manage risk, right? But there's also a very clear narrative and stance from the executive in the United States saying this is something we need to do. AI is good. We need to foster the AI innovation ecosystem. We need to spur migration in this field, right? We're going to put a lot of money into this, and we lack this in Europe, and it's a huge problem. And oftentimes we speak about polarization in the US, and rightly so, right? But that's across political parties. And if we look at the German example now, in the US, at least like in the executive branch, Biden published the executive order, all the sort of like departments can follow suit. We don't have that luxury in Germany, right? How can we still, however, sort of create a positive vision of what AI can achieve, create a narrative from the top as well, right? And I miss this somehow in Germany, where we essentially say, you know what, which is what the executive order says, in every single ministry in Germany, every single sort of like government department, you need an excuse not to use AI. Why don't we get this from the Chancellery or whoever is in charge, whoever can they coordinate this between three parties, right? Where everybody feels, okay, we have a collective purpose, we don't need the bickering. We all have an interest across political parties to pull on one string and drive this forward. And you know what? Maybe it won't even be AI. Maybe it just means that like under the umbrella of AI, we finally create the infrastructure that we actually need to like use AI applications successfully. But there's a sense of common purpose, this kind of moonshot that also brings us out of this sort of negative narrative sort of spiral that we're currently in Germany. Because I think we could do that.
Okay, that's yeah. I'm listening, but yeah, I'm not very optimistic that this is going to happen. But I think transparency is one important point in this to convince people to use AI or not to be afraid of AI. What do you think, Thomas? How we can bring people?
Is transparency the most important aspect? Or could you claim that, yes, we have this AI Act, it's important. It's important that we know that the AIs we are using are compliant with what the AI Act is defining, and transparency is part of it, safety is part of it. But wouldn't it be more important to feel how they help, how they relieve us in many senses, how useful they are? And shouldn't we talk more about that? Instead of always talking about, just as we had with the privacy, the 10 years ongoing debate, and we are so great in regulating privacy issues in Europe, but well, after and not really putting more focus on how can digital technology users, assuming that of course all the technology we are using is compliant with EU regulation. So it's not, I mean, don't get me wrong, I totally agree that we need that, that basic regulation, but more as a hygienic factor to then put much more emphasis how we can make technology a progressive force. How we can ensure that the technology that is available, great if it comes from Europe. But if it comes from the US and the US technology is compliant with your EU regulation, fine, we should use that, as we do, of course, anyways. And I mean, coming back to the headline of our discussion here, technology sovereignty. I mean, yes, we often discuss it solely under the perspective it can be only sovereign if it comes from Europe. technology sovereignty can also be defined as making particularly competent use of technology that is produced somewhere else, as long as it is safe and transparent and so forth. And I mean, right now in this discussion, we have sort of, okay, I made that big optimistic claim, but since then we are mainly talking about the problems, the restrictions, regulation. We have not talked about the huge potential in order to make lives better, of which 70% of users are convinced that it will. But it only will if we really make ample use of it. Also in the sense of competitive advantage. We have to make more intelligent use of it than others. If not, it's just a zero-sum game in terms of economic competition and so forth.
So as time advances, I'd like to open the discussion. So if you have any questions, I see one question over there. Please let us know your name, your affiliation, and also to whom you want to put the question at.
Okay, he's holding the microphone. Very comfy. My name is Christian. I'm a philosopher based at a free university in Berlin. My question is, I think we all agree, kind of, that there are a lot of important issues concerning regulation, privacy, transparency, whatever. I mean, that's kind of old wine we had with other technology as well. So we can easily subsume all these questions under like the banner of responsible tech. AI should be responsible tech as other technology was before. And I won't challenge any of Thomas's, optimism about that. A bright future is still open. Depends on our political decisions and so forth. But that's an empirical question, and we see how it goes. 2 years ago, we felt better, this year not. Maybe we need all these transformative stories of how things helped to push it in the right direction. But I would like to invite you to question the optimism concerning AI on a more deeper level, and based on on how AI itself works technically, and given that it briefly works on analyzing data from the past, and then project future steps based on probability. What was the common step based out on these data? Isn't the whole logic of an algorithm or AI kind of in conflict what we think as radical creativity? We've been called to think about radical creativity. Is the future in the same way open if it's all based on a calculus? And all these questions, I think they are a bigger threat than just the question of transparency, even though there are maybe technical limits to transparency as well. But the question of having a technique that tells us probably what to do next based on what we've done in the past is changing our concept of future, of openness, of starting anew. And I think that's for a progressive the bigger threat than the question whether we should have an optimistic way of thinking about we probably can apply certain algorithms in a proper way.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. It is a little in the different direction. Paula, can you answer that, or I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, sure, I can give it a try. I think you're right that we need to be mindful, and we need to remain mindful of the limitations of the technology as well. I think there are certain areas in which AI can be helpful, right? But then again, we also need to be able to control what kind of data is the AI, like modeling the worldview after, right? Like, do we have insights into this? Can we control what the AI is pointing at when it's giving us answers? And are the people using the AI aware of its limitations and how it can support them in their work without sort of like naively just being directed by the technology itself? Like, as a thinking aid, it can be extremely successful. Then you need to be able to sort of like assess its limitations as well. And I think, again, in the AI Act, to its credit, there's a large requirement with regards to AI literacy as well, right? It's actually like I've recently heard like a lawyer in Germany describe it as a bombshell requirement that I think a lot of companies haven't realized yet. As soon as the AI goes into effect, you have 6 months, and you need to be able to demonstrate that employees using AI, in brackets, most software systems include AI, right, need to be able to use these technologies in a responsible way. They need to understand the functioning, the limitations, etc. So that could be a massive boost to AI education, right? And also, again, like drawing this distinction between what can the technology help us with and where do humans need to be in charge. And again, I return to a point that I tried to make in the beginning. be it AI or another technology, there are no app-based solutions to social problems. There are no app-based solutions to social problems. So we need like humans guiding the development. Tech can help, right? But it has clear limitations. So we need to distinguish between the two.
So Kim, you wanted to add something to that?
No, I totally agree. I mean, the other day someone came to me and asked me how the AI Act was going to solve homelessness. And these are like issues that are such big societal problems that I think we have to also sort of, show that we don't, get too optimistic on everything it can do. I do have to say I didn't fully agree with what was said just now about that it doesn't matter where the technology comes from. Because I think if you really look at who now owns the cloud infrastructure, where we basically secure all the data that we use for training AI, and indeed the technology can be made elsewhere and then be trained and optimized in Europe, which is of course another way of creating European champions. But if you see that it's basically two big American corporations that own our infrastructure, which is Microsoft and Amazon, and almost everything runs on Azure and the Amazon infrastructure, then I am very worried that, we are never going to be able to keep up, and that we also never going to be able to protect our citizens, because if you have your data stored at an American cloud server, American government can always ask for that data, because that's what they said in their Cloud Act. So if we really want to make sure that, we have European sovereignty, we need European champions. We need European corporations. And I think we cannot be naive on, that they will do that. There's a high chance that, there won't be any progressive politics anymore next year in the United States. And I'm not too convinced that they will be like, oh, no, of course, we will keep everything sovereign in Europe. So I think we have to be more careful also with the data of our citizens when it comes to, saying that it's okay to not have European big infrastructure, for example, because I think that's absolutely crucial.
Yeah, thank you on that. So many hands. I think please be short, and please have a question. This Mr. in the back, he was the first one, I think.
Thank you. David, Director of Studies and Policy at the Foundation for European Progressive Studies. I actually have two questions. They were not short, but I will try to shorten them up as much as possible.
Please.
The first one, in line, it came to mind when you are trying to somehow give this idea that AI is delivering, it can help on delivering better quality of life. And the feeling is that maybe the same AI will not be available to everybody. So not only for citizens, we'll have maybe AI of quality A and AI of quality 2, but even companies, big multinationals or big companies will have access to a certain type of AI, maybe relying on trillion of data points. So is it the role of the public sector to maybe try to facilitate access of reliable AI, good AI, even to small, medium enterprises or maybe households? Otherwise, we have the good and the bad dermatologist, or the good and the bad self-driven car. Mm-hmm. So inequality and AI. The other one is instead related to EU regulation on AI. We had the first part on ethics, and this discussion is now on implication for work. At FEPS, we just have published a study, a pool on workers in the Scandinavian countries on their approach to algorithmic management. And 40% of workers are already affected now by algorithmic management, and with a lot of negative repercussions on job insecurity, level of trust, job autonomy, job satisfaction, level of stress. So it's not something about only what will be the impact on the jobs in the future, but it's already impacting the way we work today. And it feels like maybe there's no consensus on regulating the work side, the employment side of artificial intelligence, but does it change anything if we work on algorithmic management. So the way in which we use data, can that be a frame in which maybe we can provide some sort of limitation to the use of data in the space of a worker? Thank you.
Michael, do you want to respond on that?
Well, I mean, directly on the on your second question, I mean, the position that I think our labor minister has also made very clear is that we would be very much, I mean, the labor minister here is in favor of algorithmic management regulation. Other ministers of this coalition are not. But nevertheless, this is a topic that the EU Commission is actively already discussing, of course. But I think this highlights an important point. And I think, Paula, you already alluded to that. Of course, we need to talk about the power structures within which new technologies are introduced at the company level. And you mentioned co-decision-making already. I think this is very important, of course. I would just like to underline the very first legislative project the federal government did that had anything to do with AI explicitly was in 2019, a clarification of precisely the legal framework for co-determination in companies to clarify that, yes, of course, when AI systems are introduced, the works councils need to agree. And if then, in a context like that, you introduce an algorithmic management system, of course, there are still many, many hurdles to take. This doesn't solve everything because I think in practicality, in the real world, of course, you need a works council that has the resources and the skills to actually take an informed decision when confronted with that, if they are confronted, and you need to have a works council in the first place. So, of course, those are significant hurdles that I want to recognize, but I would also like to say that we can focus. I think it's definitely an option, and it's not a contradiction at all. It's not mutually exclusive to focus on, you know, some form of regulation of algorithmic management. But we can also take a step back and say, okay, maybe we have a bigger regulatory impact on technologies more general through very, very well, let's call them old school labor regulations, if we make them effective in the age of AI. And I think that's perhaps also a route to take. To keep in mind, because ultimately new regulations, of course, they'll always require political consensus. So, you know, as long as we can work already, you know, in the hope that something like that might happen, we can already work with what we have and try to upskill and you know, make more effective the regulatory frameworks we already have in place.
Can I maybe add something?
Yes, sure, please.
I worked on the platform work directive, which was, of course, adopted without the support of Germany and France. There we have a very good chapter already on algorithmic management, specifically for platform workers. There's a lot of discussions going on now on the EU level to see if we can have that algorithmic management chapter specifically also expanded to making sure that it is for all workers. And I really do believe that will set in motion even more discussion on how do we want AI. Do we want AI? I think that's a fair question still also to ask. Do we want AI to be deployed everywhere? And then how? And it would be amazing if, you know, that we would have more discussion with trade unions and not only with the top level, but really the people on the ground who have to use artificial intelligence, how they see it, where they are worried about, how we can make sure that, you know, your data is protected, but that you're also not manipulated and that everyone can benefit from AI at work. So it's going to be super interesting to see to what extent in the coming months also the new European Commission will take on board this idea of making sure that, you know, the new flagship when it comes to social policy after the Platform Workers Directive, I really hope will be the Algorithmic Management Directive.
I'm not sure if the question of will AI be available for everyone and in the same quality? Will we be able to manage that, or could this be a problem? Paula, maybe. You don't know? Okay.
No. I mean, like, I think, yes, this could be a problem. Right? The question is just, what approach do we want to take politically, right? Do we want to basically create something like a right to AI, right? Or like alternatively, you know, like can we invest more, let's say, in like public infrastructure that allows, like public access to AI? I mean, in the defense of the big companies, right? I think there's also a lot of effort there to make that technology widely available. I'm not so concerned about the US companies. I think they're pretty much on top of this effort already, right? But then, I mean, sometimes like when these questions come, like everybody should have a right to AI. I don't have a right to drink champagne every day, right? And it probably shouldn't be a fundamental right. I understand that's a trivial example, but I think we still need to think about, is there a basic right for everybody to have the best of everything? Like maybe it is in the AI case, right? But I think it's just a conversation we need to have, and then how do you structure that? But true, like I think power concentration, that is an issue. And I think like a lot of companies are a lot more concerned now about antitrust than, let's say, data protection or other types of regulation. Antitrust, I think, is where the hot seat will be at.
You wanted to add something, Thomas?
First of all, yes, the antitrust stuff, European ecosystem, of course, we need that as well. Towards, is it possible that we have a sort of 2 or 3 class systems of access to AI? Of course it is possible. But is it likely? I mean, the way that digital technology diffuses in general is creating more access for many people to do stuff, because it is a scaling technology that diffuses rapidly, and that gets cheap because it is doing repetitive tasks in the digital realm. So, yes, we can ask, will there be probably, I don't know, only few people who can afford the best AI doctor? That is possible. But much more likely is that many, many more people will get better diagnosis for a much cheaper price if we apply AI diagnosis systems in the public health system. And that is what we should focus on.
Okay, thank you. There were 2 more questions here, one here in front. Please wait for the mic.
No problem. Oh, okay. Again, I hold it. My name is Eric Tietz. My question I put forward as a private citizen in that sense. I was one of the people here that were a little bit more pessimistic about the AI approach. It's because there are certain aspects that I don't understand. And I hope I can put my question forward and you make me understand. I don't see, even though with an AI Act, with other points, how we will be able to regulate in execution the AI if we look at the most potent part of AI, black box AI, where we don't understand how it works, how we don't understand how it comes up with solutions. I don't see any way that we can regulate that if the firms that employ the AI in itself don't understand either. So how are we supposed to do that in effect in the end?
Kim, maybe that's a question to you.
Yeah, so the good news is there's not that much black box, like where we totally don't understand what it does AI yet. Of course, that will come. The way we try to make sure that we circumvent that in the AI Act is really looking at the full supply chain. So you start with looking at the data, make sure that it's as the least biased as possible. You cannot debias data. Then you really make sure there's transparency on the prompts that you use. Then, of course, we have the black box moment. And then afterwards, we have to make sure that it's tested a lot, and also that impact assessments are made on where potential risks can be made, and have to make sure that those are avoided. And then also, even if it goes wrong afterwards, there will be possibilities for citizens to get their rights. So this is how we try to regulate it. If there is a black box situation, then we try to make sure that all the parameters around it are at least tested and checked as good as possible. And I think that's the best way to do it. We have been thinking about it for a long time, and I think this is how we do it. But maybe at some point we will learn that these systems can do so much that we also say if it's fully black box, we don't want it. These are just discussions up to the future.
Yeah. You want to add something?
Yeah, maybe to briefly add to that, then I think we also need to maybe draw a distinction, and this we have not yet talked about so much on this panel yet, between companies in Europe or operating in Europe, right, who know they're subject to the AI Act, who know there are high fines associated with non-compliance, right? If you deploy these kinds of systems, let's say like in a high-risk area, right? I think there is or will be enough awareness that, it's going to be pretty expensive to do that. It's not worth it, right, from like a cost perspective. However, I think what we should legitimately be concerned about, and this is not something that can be regulated at the European level, but where we need international engagement, right, is the kind of actors who just simply don't care about the AI Act, right? You know, if we think about like AI in elections, the kind of like interferences, right, actors who just simply don't care, you know, about whether or not they'll be regulated by the AI Act, probably they can't be caught, so to speak, by the regulator, right? So how can we, at the international level, create a system of norms, right, that prevent exactly the kind of scenario that you outlined for, and that kind of bring in the actors again, right? I know this is a challenge, a lot of authoritarian sort of like developments, but still, I think it's still worth trying. We have to, right, to reach some kind of international agreement. And I mean, this conference is about progressive security, right? We have not yet talked on this panel about the role of AI in security, the role of AI in warfare, how Europe is going to shape that debate. It's not covered by the AI Act, of course, because it's a national prerogative, military defense, right? But we have a war in Europe, and software will play a role in war as well. What is the European answer to that?
Maybe, Michael, you have a take on that because you are working on international level regulating AI also.
I think we're far from something, you know, like a global code on AI, but we do see bits and pieces emerging. I think it's a very formative moment in the space of global AI governance. What I think is very likely going to be a first step is a proliferation of different fora that agree on something like relatively soft, non-binding guidelines for companies, but globally. We see in a small circle of the G7, the Hiroshima process that outlines, broadly outlines some of such guidelines. I think there will be a more global effort to be expected as well. Following on from that, there's different initiatives at the level of the United Nations as well. We see a mix of resolutions started or suggested by individual countries, as well as an overarching initiative, the Global Digital Compact, that also has a very large part on AI. But these are well, I mean, you see in the press every day how difficult it is to get agreement in one country. Multiply that globally, so I think it's going to be slow, and we'll have to live with that period in between. Then, when it comes to the bad actors, yeah, well, I mean, you're not going to regulate bad actors away or into better behavior if there's you know, concrete, you know, whether that's state or non-state actors. Of course, and there clearly we're in a conversation that's more in the classical realm of cybersecurity, of defense. But of course, in times like these, there's very difficult questions from which we probably don't, well, that we need to address as well, around the question of disinformation and influencing, especially in election times, across state borders as well.
But I think I'd like to push back on one point. I think it's too easy to say, like, why are there always going to be bad actors, right? I think there's two things actually we can do. One is like invest more in deterrence, right? You know.
Yeah, but that's what I meant by classical defense.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly. But I mean,
right?
Also, you know, not just on the hardware realm, but also on the software realm, right? And then also, I mean, on the international realm, lead by example, right? And I think this is generally like a kind of theme that we need, or like something that we need to endorse in order to shape the narrative around AI in a more positive way, right? Give us positive examples, right? I think like right now, and again, this is a general challenge in the current sort of like conversation, particularly in Germany, in the media ecosystem, everything is extremely negative and unnecessarily so. I think it's blown out of proportion completely at this point, right? But maybe there are small examples from local governments, right? From the industry as well, where, hey, you know what, like this made lives better. This is exciting. This is something we can invest in positively. This is examples we can copy across Europe as well. Like a good friend of mine, Yuri Schneller, just wrote a book about agile democracy, outlining exactly these kinds of examples. And I think we need a lot more in the shared debate, right?
That's a very interesting point, because this leads me to the last question that I would like to give to everyone on the panel. Just to tell me a positive example. So, Kim, maybe you want to start with how will AI make your life better? What is the example in your life?
In my personal life, In my personal life, I really use it to make sure I figure out when to cut which plant in my garden. But that I think is something else, because there's a lot of different opinions on that. I think what the most important thing it can do is really making sure that we have fewer boring administrative tasks. I really like the quote that you mentioned, like this whole thing of imagine if AI could do the dishes or clean my house, that would be amazing. But for now, I think, reducing boring administrative tasks and also making sure that everyone profits from that and that we can actually, have a 4-day work week. I think that would be my optimistic view on making sure that we can actually achieve, a society in which everyone benefits.
Thank you. So, Michael, you've got 15 seconds because with 1 minute
very
left.
Quick. We're deploying AI to save lives on German construction sites, and I find that a really great example of how you can use it in public administration. Every 3 days so far, sadly, we have a deadly accident on German construction sites, yeah? We're using an AI system to detect risks, have a very predictive algorithm where high-risk construction sites are, send staff there to advise those companies that are constructing and to improve their health and safety, and it's working.
Interesting. Okay, good. Paula?
Yeah, I mean, healthcare, I think, is a really prominent one, where all of a sudden research is accelerated in ways we could never have imagined, right? Because this is a classic data-driven field, right, where you can actually use AI to gain new insights. And I'm really excited about the potential that it holds.
You, Thomas?
For society, I wish really that we had, for the whole of Europe, a sort of app store with brilliant learning apps, AI-driven, that every student in Europe can delve into and get sucked into these learning environments just as they get sucked into today at Fortnite or Clash of Clans.
So maybe you're interested what AI does to my life already. It transforms what we were speaking about into text, and you will be able to read that tomorrow in a special newsletter. So thank you very much for the panelists. I think this was a very interesting debate, which is not over yet. We need to talk and lead by example. I think that's important. Thank you very much.
Thank you for great moderation. Thank you to the speakers. And before I let you out of this room, I still have a few announcements. So we will now have a lunch break. It's 12:13, which means Mahlzeit in Germany. So we say bye to the live stream for this time. And please enjoy the snacks we prepared. The food and drinks will be served in a foyer. And then we will be meeting back at 1:15 p.m. To the next session block, and these will be again breakout sessions here at the main stage. Progress or Disruption, Fostering a Value-Based Transatlantic Security Architecture, co-designed with the Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung. In Forum, so on the right, Europe's Economic Security Beyond Competitiveness, Pushing for Social Progress in the Single Market, co-designed by the Foundation for European Progressive Studies and Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung as well. And in the boardroom, so upstairs, From the Midwest to the Former East, Strategies to Empower the Regions That Matter, co-designed with the Progressive Policy Institute, our guests and friends from Washington, D.C. So think about it, which session you want to join. And now I wish you bon appétit. Let's have lunch.